I said to James Ray, I never want this again. You're pushing us too far. And nobody did anything. James Ray didn't do anything, nobody else did anything, and I didn't know what to do. So I said to James Ray, I'm going to call 911.
Did you know he was going to do that many rounds, that many stones, and make it that intense?
No. Looking back at it, I could have. Our existence, it doesn't take so much to take us over the edge. Much less than a lot of people think.
This is True Crime Arizona, the podcast.
At the end of the last episode, I told you I got a Facebook message from Amira Hamilton, the owner of Angel Valley, where the Spiritual Warrior Retreat was held. I messaged her back immediately, and after chatting back and forth, we agreed I would come back up there to not only sit down with her for an interview, but she wanted to show me the grounds so I could visually understand where everything took place. Remember this part from episode 2? So we're leaving Angel Valley. They were closed due to some transition that they're working on, but I think what the big takeaway was that it's hard to get here, and imagining emergency crews and ambulances trying to navigate this in the dark. I was in the car with my photographer Shane Egan when we tried to visit Angel Valley the first time. We learned what that transition is. Amira has recently sold the property and business to a new owner, and they're making some changes and upgrades, which is why they're closed to the public right now. Amira will still be living on the property, as she has for about 20 years. So this time, we got to drive through the gate. Immediately, you drive over a bridge painted in rainbow colors. And on the other side, you see the first part of the grounds. What looks like a giant labyrinth made of rocks is to your left, next to a giant heart made of rocks too. There are small cabins on the grounds where people stay, a building for group activities, some other small buildings here and there, and then the office, which at the moment is also Amira's house. She came out to greet us right away and showed us around a bit.
That is an original totem pole. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the raven.
Where'd you get that?
The man who came up with this idea to make this medicine wheel here, he had spotted it somewhere. It is original from the Northwest. Among the indigenous tribes in the Northwest, the raven is the most sacred animal.
You can tell she's really passionate about this place.
This is a place where it is very easy to connect with the ancestors of the land, the ancestors, your own ancestry.
There are a couple formations called medicine wheels made of rocks on the property. People can sit and reflect at them. In the distance, you can hear the creek flowing throughout the grounds. But there's a noticeable area on the north side of the grounds that has absolutely nothing there. It kind of sticks out. It looks bare, besides a couple small trees. It's empty for a reason.
This is basically the place where it happened. The fire pit was over there, and the sweat lodge was over here. And the center where the stones were put was here.
And there's nothing here now?
No, because it was recommended to us that this place just needed to, be quiet, back to nature. So the only thing we have left is the sand.
You want to lead the way and we'll just follow you?
Yep.
Perfect.
Amira invited us into the building where group activities are held inside.
Your title here at Angel Valley?
I'm the founder of Angel Valley.
That's where we sat down to do much of this interview. She knew I had a lot to ask her and was raw and open from the start.
Last year, after my husband died, I am in the process of fully retiring, but remaining involved a little bit on the sidelines.
Her husband died of an unexpected illness in 2021. Until that point, she and Michael had been a team for decades. Amira is originally from Holland and met Michael later in life.
Explain first how you and Michael found this property and how it became Angel Valley and what Angel Valley is.
To begin with the last piece, Angel Valley is a very special place where people come to find themselves, to heal, to grow, to relax, to work on themselves. And Michael and I, we believe that nature is the best healer, the best way to get in touch with yourself.
They stumbled upon this property in 2002 and were so mesmerized by it, they knew they had to buy it. So began Angel Valley.
How many people do you think you've hosted on retreats over the years here?
I've never exactly counted it. I was thinking about that a while ago. Thousands. We have a database of close to 10,000 people. So most of them have been here.
They come from all over the world. It was just after about a year of being open that he came into their lives.
When did you first meet James Ray?
We met James Ray in 2003, within a year that we were here, through somebody that we knew who approached us that said he had somebody that was looking for a place where they could do a vision quest and where they could do a sweat lodge.
As you've heard in the previous episodes, the Vision Quest was a multi-day and night activity where participants would live off the land alone, and the sweat lodge, well, I don't have to tell you what that was at this point in the season. But early on, the whole retreat started out small. Amira said it was only about 15 participants with James. The entire retreat was less intense, at least at first. Then came the fame.
We watched it grow. In the next year it was a quite a bit larger group. And then in 2006, James Ray had become all of a sudden very famous because of The Secret and the movie and the book. And so then it started to get big. At the time also some kind of an arrogance about him. But we said, well, okay, not everybody is the same, right?
Everything about James was ramping up. The number of followers, the amount of money he was making, the number of retreats, the intensity of his exercises and events.
How did the retreat change over the years? Because at least from my research, there were some concerns and some health issues with the sweat lodge years prior to 2009.
Yeah, 2003 was nice, good. 2004 was perfect. 2005 came with a larger group. We had a larger sweat lodge than we would normally have. And I was around, and after they came out, one of the people was just outside himself. He was yelling and screaming. We couldn't talk to him. He didn't hear us. And I had this kind of, this is not good. But also I had this feeling of kind of, I don't know how to deal with this. And nobody did anything. James Ray didn't do anything. Nobody else did do anything. And I didn't know what to do. So I said to James Ray, I'm going to call 911. And he had gone to his room. And I went to his room and I said, I'm going to call 911. You're not, he said. I said, I am. So I called, and then when they came, and when I came back to the site and he had returned to the site, he was yelling and screaming at me. I said to James Ray, I never want this again. You're pushing it too far. Afterwards, he did apologize for yelling at me in front of the whole group. So I thought, well, I hope he has learned from that.
For the next 3 years, Amira's general manager was more closely involved in the Spiritual Warrior retreat rather than her. For the most part, things seemed okay, but there were people who had gotten sick during the sweat lodge activity, and Amira felt there were now too many people for the accommodations they had available. But it went further than that. Their relationship started to sour with James, and the Hamiltons had decided 2009 would be their last year working with James before the retreat began. In the past few episodes, you've heard a lot about the large amount of money people were spending at James Ray events. Spiritual Warrior alone was about 10 grand per participant. What Amira was about to tell me was something I hadn't heard before at all.
A number of things had happened that we had this kind of, this is no longer working for us. Yes, when he comes, it is a big event. It brings in good revenue, and to be honest, we also have to make sure that we survive. But we're no longer going to do that. We're done. And there were a number of things, and one of them was a disagreement. Normally, when we have groups, with a facilitator, we have a contract, and they decide what they charge their participants. The contract between the facilitator and us is how much they pay us for what we provide. James did it differently. He wanted the participants to pay us directly. So they would sign up for his retreat, and then they had to pay us an additional amount. In 2009, in particular, we found that people didn't realize that with the $10,000 by that time, because every year it went up 20–25%, they had not realized that the $10,000 did not include our part. So
they were going to have to pay on top of that.
On top of that, they had...
How much more were they going to have to pay?
Something close to $2,000, because it was a 6-day retreat. There were a lot of additional expenses that we had because of what James already required.
Sure.
So
let me get this straight. Most people who came here, that would pay you, of course, you're providing services, there's a payment there. The facilitator of the retreat would pay you a certain portion of whatever they were bringing in.
That's normal.
That's normal. James Ray would charge his participants the $10,000 just for that and wouldn't use any of that money to pay you. Instead, he expected those participants to pay thousands more on top of that, and he wouldn't burden any of that cost.
And the problem was that the participants did not realize that the moment they signed up for his retreats.
It wasn't just the finances, though. Her relationship with James was dwindling. The retreat was now arranged by his staff. James himself wouldn't really talk to the Hamiltons. He would show up at the retreat right before it started and leave immediately after it was done.
That was not us. We wanted to be communicating with people who were doing their work here. And people who were returning facilitators. Over the years, we built a more and more closer relationship normally.
Not further apart.
With James, it was just a non-existing relationship by 2009.
It was decided 2009 would be their last time working with James Ray. Just get through this last spiritual warrior retreat and that would be it. At least that's what Amira thought would be the case. By 2009, Amira was well aware of the events that went on through the 5-day retreat. One of those being the Vision Quest. It was while participants were in the middle of that Amira learned something concerning.
I found that they were instructed not to carry water with them, which blew my mind, because the first year that I prepared for the Vision Quest, his team, his staff would visit the people the next day with water. Now, I knew that they didn't do that anymore, but for some reason I just assumed that they would then carry their own water. They had big backpack, so I assumed that there was water in there. I mean, I've been in Arizona for 25 years. You don't go out in the desert without water, right? And when I found that out, wow, that was very difficult to not step in and say, okay, then I will bring them water or something like that. Maybe I should have done that, I don't know.
Did you raise that concern to James during the Vision Quest?
I did not. And that's one of those things, should I have done that? Well, guarantee that would have caused a big blow up.
I will say, Amira was really open with me about everything. When you go through those 5 days and look back at it now, there were definitely red flags. And it's hard not to say, hey, these weird things were going on. How did you not stop this before it was too late? Amira really thought James had this under control. Even if she didn't agree with everything, she was trying to stay out of his way. She didn't want another big argument with him. Of course, now it's easy to say, I should have done this or I should have done that, but she didn't know what was about to happen. She saw participants head to the sweat lodge, but she wasn't there for most of the ceremony. She was busy tending to other things on the grounds, which was normal.
When did you get alerted to the fact that something was really wrong?
Well, a number of things. When I saw people who came out in the condition that they were in, I have this kind of, my God, what's happening inside there?
An Angel Valley staff member overheard things happening at the ceremony and came running to Amira. She was extremely upset and told Amira something was wrong.
I said, how many rounds have they done? She said, 7. He says 7, but it's the 8th round. That was towards the end. I was kind of, oh my God. So it was kind of growing. Yeah, when they started to come out, it was, you've never seen a disaster like that.
Amira ran and called 911. The tragedy played itself out from there. Ambulances, helicopters, screaming, crying, confusion, death.
It has gotten dark, and there was all these ambulances, and the helicopters had already left before it was dark. And you know, all these lights, and the colored lights, and the reds and the blues and the da-da-da, and then the crime tape, and I mean, that was pretty chaotic. You know, chaos is just the opposite of anything we ever did here. And at some point, he told me that these 2 people had died.
What went through your mind?
Hard to describe. Anger. I was ready to rip James Ray to pieces. I mean, shock, not knowing what to say, kind of the world collapsed on me, kind of, this can't be, but I knew it was true.
Detectives asked Amira if everyone was doing drugs.
I am 99% sure not. No drugs involved of any kind.
Kirby Brown and James Shore died at the scene. Liz Newman died days later in the hospital. Dozens of others were either hospitalized or sitting at Angel Valley, injured and terrified. James Ray was put into a cop car for a while before they let him go.
They let him go, and then he went to see his staff in our library rather than coming to the dining room where all the participants were, and then he left.
So he didn't see the participants again?
No.
Did you see James Ray again?
No. Oh, well, while he was down at the site, I saw him for a brief moment after I knew that these 2 people had died. But otherwise, that was the last I ever saw of him until I saw him in the courtroom.
Did he say anything to you down there?
No.
There was never any discussion of what had happened between the 2 of you guys?
No.
That's long been a point of contention with everyone. The families of the victims feel James Ray abandoned them all as people were severely sick and dying. James Ray was charged with 3 counts of manslaughter and ended up convicted of 3 counts of negligent homicide. James's defense team hammered home 2 major points that all placed blame on the Hamiltons.
Did you know that James was going to turn on you at the trial?
We could expect it, but we didn't know what kind of things they would come out with. We knew that James Ray was going to do whatever he could to get himself out of this. He had hired very high-level attorneys, and good attorneys are master manipulators.
Mr. Ray didn't force anyone to go into the sweat lodge. Mr. Ray didn't force anyone to
They first argued James and his team didn't even build the sweat lodge. that the Hamiltons and their staff did, and that it wasn't built correctly. They also argued that the Hamiltons could not prove that toxins and pesticides were not used on the grounds, and that could have played a part in the deaths. Amira and Michael wrote a book about the entire experience, but she hasn't really done an in-depth media interview like this since the trial, so this is the first time we're hearing her full side of the story as it unraveled in a courtroom so many years ago. This is quite a large chunk of this raw interview.
When it came to the trial, there were a couple things that James and his defense attorneys tried to turn on to you guys. I want you to talk to me about that part, because there was that part of the trial where they said, this is the Hamiltons' fault.
I know.
So from your perspective, when the sweat lodge was built, how did you build it?
We built it, number one, per request of James Ray, of a size that would hold them all. We had asked his staff, his right-hand person, to split the group. We were building to build an additional sweat lodge. If he didn't want to do them back to back, no way. It should be all at the same time, all together, led by him. We hired a person who has much experience with building sweat lodges, and sometimes also Native Americans also build larger sweat lodges because sometimes they have larger groups. So we did it with his design and his study work on how do we do that in a way that it's safe, that it's a solid structure, you know, that it doesn't cave in, or that it, and that was built in 2008.
Did he look at it and say, this looks good?
Well, you know, number one, we did a number of sweat lodges there during that year that it was there, and it worked. Number two, James was so particular on just anything that we just assumed we didn't hear anything, any comments on the sweat lodge. If it was not right, we would have heard it, no doubt. A lot of things had also been mentioned about the covering of the sweat lodge. Tarps! There was a thick layer of blankets, breathable material, and yes, there was a tarp over it. And there has been a lot of talk about, what, a tarp over it? These people were in there, too long, too hot. That's simple.
Amira gave some perspective on that.
When other retreats would use the sweat lodge, was it a shorter amount of time, or was there less water? I mean, what made James Ray's sweat lodge experience different?
The Native Americans do it in 4 rounds, and in every round they do 4 or 5 stones, so there may be a total of some 20 stones brought in 4 rounds. During the rounds the door is open, people can go in and out. James did 8 rounds, and he had a total of 63 stones in that. Nobody had ever done something like that. The other sweat lodges that people have done, they would stick to the normal 4 rounds and a decent amount of stones. James did it different.
Did you know he was going to do that many rounds, that many stones, and make it that intense?
No, looking back at it, I could have. But yeah, looking back at things, it's always 20/20 eyesight, right?
They claim there was toxins in this area that people were exposed to, and that could have or did lead to their deaths. And then later on, from what I read, you guys couldn't dispute if those toxins existed, so they seemed to run with that. Can you explain that whole scenario?
Okay, they have sprayed weed killers. They have stored the blankets of the sweat lodge covering in a place where they have rat poison. We are a place, we do not do toxins. We have everything very green. We have everything very clean. You know, we do not do herbicides. We do not do weed killers.
Was any of that true?
Well, we had some rat bait. Hey, we are out here in the country. There's critters. And what do you do when you have critters? You take the most effective, least invasive measures to keep your sweat lodge blankets from being eaten by the rats and making nice nests for the mice, right? So yes, we had some stuff, you know, it's
normal stuff.
Normal stuff.
In the end, it's hard to say whether the defense team's strategy worked. On one hand, James Ray was convicted of negligent homicide and sentenced to 2 years in prison. But on the other hand, he could have been convicted of much more serious charges and spent many more years in prison.
The outcome of the trial, negligent homicide, 2 years in prison. How did you feel about that outcome?
It was difficult to accept that.
Why?
That it was just negligent homicide and that it was just 2 years and that eventually he got out even earlier. We did not want to be in the mode of anger and revenge or whatever. However, it did not feel in balance with what happened. So it was difficult to accept that.
You did.
The outcome of all of this put the Hamiltons in a very tough position in multiple ways. First, with the families of the victims.
With Kirby's parents, for a number of months, we had a very, very nice, very regular relationship until they were pulled into this lawsuit that they together did against James Ray and then against us, and then you cannot talk anymore. I also had a very nice connection with the wife of James Shore. That ended for the same reason.
Amira knew Liz Newman relatively well because Liz had been at the Spiritual Warrior event several times. She says the Newmans also sued her and Michael for Liz's death.
Do you blame the families for suing you?
You know, no, I do not blame them. If there is anything to blame, it is that system in our society that when you feel that you need to be compensated in money for the pain that you experience, whether somebody has misbehaved or whatever, you go sue them. So it had nothing to do with whether they felt we were guilty. No, there was money could be gotten from there. And since they were doing this together, also people, lovely people like the Browns, and they were kind of pulled into this. Well, they wanted to do something with James Ray, and then, you know, the attorneys had this kind of, okay, first we do that, and then we take the Hamiltons.
The civil lawsuits were all settled, and then just like that, it was all over. But what remained for Amira was tough. Comments and posts online, and a negative shadow cast over Angel Valley.
The financial loss for us was more in the afterwards, that, you know, it took so much of our time and it took so much of the attention, and we lost business because of it. That was very difficult. It was so the total opposite of anything we had ever done here or envisioned here or wanted for this place, and then having to deal with the media and people who were saying all these nasty things, and that was traumatic. Our clientele is people who are, you know, thinking in terms of energy, but it doesn't mean that they always see the bigger picture per se. So yes, we have also had people that said that they felt an energy that was not good, or that had to do with death, and yeah, what can you do?
Each person in this season of the podcast has talked about how they believe this tragedy happened to the victims, whether they felt that was manipulation from James Ray, cult-like tactics, or just being too physically weak inside that sweat lodge to even get themselves out. Amira Hamilton had seen this event go on for 7 years. So I wanted to know what she thought happened, and her perspective was something I continued to think about on the drive back home from Angel Valley.
These people that were participating in James Ray's retreats were all very committed to make their life successful. A lot of them had things in their life that they wanted to improve. They could afford to pay James Ray what he was asking, and they were committed people. They were not people who give up at the first little obstacle that is there. The mentality of kind of, I'm going for it. And they went for it. And they paid a lot of money to go for it. So then when you are in a sweat lodge like that, and you get maybe a little wobbly, what do you think? I'm going to tough it out. I'm not going to give up. Our existence, it doesn't take so much to take us over the edge. Much less than a lot of people think. People do not realize how thin the veil is between being alive and being dead.
Next time on True Crime Arizona, the Sedona Sweat Lodge deaths.
Hey, this is James.
And Bear.
Today, let's talk about what it means to be a warrior.
They will say that he's trying to use the deaths of their loved ones in this comeback, in this attempt at redemption.
Just stop. Just do something else.
I never saw true remorse. If he hasn't learned, something's going to happen again if given the opportunity.
True Crime Arizona, the podcast, is hosted by me, Brianna Whitney, and produced by Sergio Hernandez. It's a production of Arizona's Family, 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.